So what I did is I drilled an 1/8 inch hole, and then I just threaded in this number 8 sheet metal screw, and then I just took pliers and just rocked it back and forth, and the plug will come right out. I will try to do one so you can see how easy it is. And once again, I cannot see in the viewfinder while I'm doing this, so I'll have to assume you can. So I've got my screw, I've got the hole in the plug, and I just thread it in a little bit. Take my channel locks here and just rock it back and forth. And there you have it. Not too bad. Now the instructions say to lightly seat this needle here and go out 2 turns. And so what I'm going to do is as I'm screwing the needle in, I'm going to count the amount of turns that the factory had it set at, just for a reference point. But then I will turn it out 2 turns. And the next thing I'm going to do is take the float bowls off, and according to everything I read, that's 4 screws right here. These screws are a bear. They say they're really soft, they strip easy. One tip I read was to take a screwdriver and a hammer and give them a light tap on each one. And I also heard if you strip the head out, you can saw a flat in it and use a flat blade screwdriver. I also read about taking a needle nose vice grip and gripping it around the side and loosening it that way too. But in the kit they give you new screws, so if we can get them out, we shouldn't have any problems after that. So we'll give her a shot. 3 of the screws came out really well. The 4th one here did not. So you can see I got a vice grip clamped to it right here, and I'll just give it a little turn here. And you can see it loosened up. Okay, so then we'll finish taking the screws out and take the float bowl off. And now we have the float bowl off here, and one thing I'm going to put on is the main jet. And the main jet will go right here. The main jet I'm going to go with is a 125 on the front carburetor and a 122.5 on the rear carburetor. The 2 jets between the front and rear carburetor are different, and they typically use the bigger jet on the front carburetor. And we have the carburetor going to the back cylinder. We're going to replace the main jet here. We're going to put in a 122.5. And with those 2 jets changed, I'll replace the float bowl. And I'll use the provided screws in the kit, the replacement screws. And now I have the float bowl back on the other carburetor. Everything's put back together on that side. And what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over, and we are going to put a 20,000 shim in each of the needles on the other side. So here we go. And now to get at the 2 needles that we need to shim, we'll be taking that cover off right there and taking the guts in that apart. Okay, here's one thing I noticed when taking the cover off here is there is a locating pin right here, so the cover needs to fit on there one way. You also have a little looks like an O-ring right there. Taking it off, you got this spring sticking out. What we'll do is we'll very carefully take that diaphragm and pull that out next. You noticed I laid down some paper toweling. I want to keep everything nice and clean inside the carburetor, so let's get that diaphragm out next. And here's a shot of the diaphragm out. You want to be careful, this is very, very light rubber, so be gentle with that. This is the needle that we're going to shim up right here. We'll pull this spring out, and you aren't going to be able to see it, but the needle is held in by a retainer there, and we're going to very gently work that out. I'm going to come back to this one more time. I'm sure you can't see it on the camera, but inside this hole here there is a little white, I don't even know what you call it. Well, what you do is you take a needle nose pliers and get in there and gently pull that out by kind of just wiggling it a little bit. It's a kind of a press fit in there, and you really want to be careful when you're doing that. There's a spring underneath there also as a warning. So I'm going to do this probably off camera. And that was a success. You can see it's kind of held in by this O-ring here, just kind of a pressure fit. And then what I'll do is I'll turn the diaphragm upside down and just push on the needle, and the needle should come out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip this upside down. And pull the needle out. I guess there isn't any springs, but you can see the, maybe, you can see the little washer there. We're going to add one more 20 thousandths washer right there. And so I put my 20 thousandths washer on there, and then just put the needle right back in. Okay, and then I put that other white piece back in, and I can feel a spring. I can feel the spring in there working when I press on the needle. So I think that should be right. And now we are going to replace the pilot air bleed jet, and that is located right here. And that, I believe, is a 1.2. Okay, when putting the diaphragm back in, and once again, I don't know how well this is going to show, if you tip the carburetor so you can see the opening there, you can feed that needle right into its hole and align it, and then just drop it down. Reseat your diaphragm and put the top cover back on, and you're in good shape. And then it's time to do the second one. When putting the cover on, remember your locating pin here, and then you're going to want to put your spring so the center of it goes right on that little guide there. Now when taking this cover off here, the O-ring stayed in that little hole instead of staying on the cover like the last one, so just keep an eye on that little bugger there and don't let him get away. And working on the rear cylinder carburetor, again we'll replace this pilot air bleed screw right here. I have the 20,000 shim in, and I have everything back together. Now it's time to put my cover on, make sure my O-ring is still in place, and away we go. Okay, here's another thing I'm going to show you, is on that linkage there's a little kind of a bushing here that goes right in here, so when you turn the cover over, that's going to fall out, and just so you know, it goes right back in there, just like that. And now we successfully have our carburetors rejetted. It's time to put them back on now, but I think I'm going to go take a little break, stretch my legs, go have a Coke or something like that. So we'll be right back and put it on in a little bit.